Good evening and welcome to KinNections, where we preserve real voices, real stories, and real roots of families. Today, I'm honored to be speaking with Melvin Currie, who has memories and life experiences to share with us as part of the living history of his family. Mel, I'm grateful to have this opportunity to preserve these memories for future generations. Thank you and welcome. Just start sharing, start wherever you like.
Okay, so everything for me, of course, starts in Pittsburgh. That's where I was born. And as is the case for many African American, my maternal grandparents came up from Virginia. In particular, my maternal grandfather, my grandfather Jones, who has connects me to all the way back to Alma in 1735, and he came out of Lunenburg County, and uh, uh, my grandmother, who was a Wilson, came out of Pennsylvania County, a couple counties to the west. And then on my paternal side, they came up from Orange County, Caswell County, not area not too far from Hillsborough. And they all came up from that old country, which I can group together because they're both in the Piedmont region, Piedmont, Virginia, and Piedmont region of North Carolina, and came up and settled on the east end of Pittsburgh in Little Italy. So I was born in the house where my maternal grandparents, the Joneses. Now, my mother and father grew up in that neighborhood, and so they grew up with these mostly Italian families and a smattering of African American families. A smattering, I say, but a pretty powerful, very strong group of people. My grandmother was one of the founding members of what was called the Harriet Tubman Guild on the East End, and they did various good works. These women, uh, starting pretty much after World War One. For one thing, they noticed right away that Black people in the hospitals in town in that area were not being treated the way they thought Black people should be treated. So what they ended up doing was negotiating with the hospital to train some Black uh, health personnel who would, in fact, be attentive to the needs of African Americans and who were hospitalized. So my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, belonged to that group. My grandfather Jones uh, was a steel worker, open hearth, and my grandfather Currie owned a business, which was unusual. He owned a business on the East End on what was called, well, on Larmer Avenue, where mostly Italian businesses were. He had a wallpapering business. And in his store, he sold wallpaper, but he also installed wallpaper after working hours, after store hours. And that's how my mother, I believe, met my father because my mother's brother was great friends with my mother's future husband, and he worked for, that is, my uncle Bob, who's on the maternal side, worked for my paternal grandfather, Lonnie Currie, and my mother met my father that way. So let me give the names of my grandparents. Maybe I can bring up a photo. So these are my paternal grandparents. They're the ones who came up from North Carolina, Hillsborough area, and this is his name is or was Lonnie John Currie, Currie, and my paternal grandmother was Willie Daisy Enix, and her last name was spelled Enoch, but in every census record from 1870 on, there's a different spelling. It settled on Enoch, but it was spelled Enix, it was spelled Enochs, and finally they just settled on Enoch, but it was pronounced Enix.
Oh,
And he's the one who had the wallpapering business in Little Italy, and was actually quite prosperous. And my father owned an automobile in high school.
mhm.
One reason was so that after school he could help his father install wallpaper, along with my mother's brother, who that for some reason they were bosom buddies.
Okay.
Uh, and So those are my paternal grandparents. Let me try to bring up my maternal grandparents. These are my maternal grandparents.
Okay.
This is Robert Smith Jones and his wife. He's from Lunenburg County, of course, and his wife Lottie Wilson Jones. She was actually named Lasinia, but I believe even on her gravestone, it's Lottie. They married in Pittsburgh about 1923, and he is the Blackwell descendant. He goes back to Amma. All my grandparents migrated to Pittsburgh
Oh,
after. I think my grandmother Lottie was the first one, and she actually came up sometime during World War One,
okay.
near the end of, I believe,
Okay.
because she's in the 1920 census and working as a domestic servant. Uh, so she's living in the house where she is employed. And I don't know how, as a young woman, barely beyond her teenage years, was able to secure such a position far away from home, her home in Virginia. But
Right.
she did, and and then they married a few years after, about 1923, a few years after the war ended. He came north looking for a job. And I think they must have already had a connection to each other because my grandmother's sister married his uncle. Uh, his was a large family, and the sister who married his uncle was about 17 years older than she was. Yeah, so those are my grandparents. Now, um, interestingly enough, my mother, Ophelia Ophelia Isabel Jones, married my father, Robert uh, Currie, and I was supposed to be a junior. I was supposed to be a junior, but my mother's father was Robert, her brother was Robert, her husband to be was Robert, uh, and or her husband at the time was, she's already married, was Robert. Her brother Robert married the girl next door whose father was Robert and whose brother was Robert. And my mother said, "My son is not going to be Robert. That's just not going to happen."
Yeah.
Uh, so the compromise was struck. My father's name was Robert Melvin Currie. I became Melvin Robert Currie, and we avoided the collision, the Robert collision. My
Robert
father was
Robert
Robert
Melvin.
Melvin.
Okay.
I'm Melvin Robert.
Okay.
So in fact, I'm just a permutation. In some sense, I am Robert. We have the same three names, but we
Okay.
have
Got
different first names and different second names. Yeah. So I grew up in the house I grew up in was interesting. My parents separated when I was 5 years old. My younger brother and I moved back to live with my maternal grandparents. Let me bring up another picture. Um, Here's a picture of all four of us. This is
Oh,
my father, Robert, my mother, Ophelia. I'm the older of the two boys. And this picture was taken after they separated, a few years after they separated, in front of my paternal grandparents' house. But we would stop on the way home from church and have dinner with I'd have dinner with my grandparents, my paternal grandparents, the three of us and my father. Um, Here is a picture of us taken many years later.
Oh,
many years later. This
okay.
is after my paternal grandmother's funeral, taken in the house, my paternal grandparents' house.
Who is the lady in the middle?
It's my mother. This is my mother and father. So this is sort of supposed to mimic the other picture taken many
Okay.
years earlier.
Okay.
My brother, we couldn't get all four of us in that little corner, so
So it's
we took two shots.
got it.
Picture with my mother and father,
Okay.
and my brother with our parents as well.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah, so growing up with my maternal grandparents, that's my Blackwell side, through my maternal grandfather, Robert Jones, was a rich life for me because again we were in Little Italy. Almost everyone on our street was white, mostly Italian, but also Irish and German. And generally speaking, I think all of the white families were Catholic. And on my dead end street, the block at the bottom of the hill, which is a dead end, were six African American families. And the women all very well educated. They all educated at the University of Pittsburgh, including my mother's older sister. And had grown up together on that street. And it was just a very rich life for me, not just with the six African American families, but to a certain extent with the Italian families as well, because they had been there for the generation together, the generation before mine.
What was the name of the street you lived
The
in?
name of the street was Dean Street, Dean.
House you lived in, is that still standing?
No, it went away about 13 years ago, but it was the home to four generations of my family, including my brother's children. So, growing up in the first few years of my life in that house, and I was actually born in that house, by the way, was wonderful because my mother's sister lived there with her husband, one of the bedrooms on the third floor. And my cousin Grace lived there as well while she was going to college. She went to Chatham College in Pittsburgh. And of course, my mother and grandmother. So I had effectively four mothers for a couple years. My mother's sister, Aunt Geraldine, took me to all sorts of cultural affairs and boat rides on the Ohio River and restaurants. My cousin Grace, while she was there, taught me. She was majoring in biology, but she was taking German to satisfy some sort of distributional requirement. And so she taught me German, and that turned out to be very important in my life. Very important. Uh, I, I, I decided that that was a language I was going to speak because it felt so good in my throat, and it ended up being pivotal as far as my path to becoming a mathematician, strangely enough. So my grandmother was there. We had a peach tree and a cherry tree in the backyard, and that gave rise to oodles of cans of preserves through the winter. And my mother got training, 6 months of training to become an operating room technician, and all of those things, all of those women were fantastic. My grandfather Jones, who is the Blackwell, died when I was about 7 years old. So I only had a 2 year overlap with him, but he was also, uh, well, caregiver. He taught me how to play checkers. I would sit in his lap and read to him. It was a wonderful life on Dean Street. The Irish Catholic kid up the street, one of the few non-Italians, was on his way to becoming a teacher and a math teacher, and I turned out to be an apt pupil for him, and so he would share the mathematics that he was working on with me, and riddles and the game of chess. So that was the beginning of my life on Dean Street. We played football and and touch football in the street and down in the field next to the railroad tracks. It was there was some racial tension. I could not we the black people could not swim in the public pool around the corner or three blocks away from where we lived.
Mhm.
We had to basically go to Highland Park, which was across the ravine, which was a posher neighborhood, but some reason the more upper class white people were more accepting of us swimming in their pool than the working class people in our neighborhood. And I think part of that is that the posher, uh, the people who lived in the posher neighborhoods were uh, more secure about their standing. The Italians and other white Catholics in our neighborhood were less secure about where they were on the totem pole. So that was an example of the kind of racial tensions that existed. We could not swim in the pool in our neighborhood. So it turned out I was a pretty good student, actually a very good student, and especially strong in mathematics. And in eighth grade, we essentially, there were 8 of us chosen to take algebra. It was the first year algebra had been offered to eighth graders in my school. And so the 8 of us took, and again, my class was, for most of the years I was there, was predominantly white. But there were 3 black kids among the 8 chosen to take algebra and 5 white kids. And unfortunately, our math teacher was in an automobile accident in September and couldn't teach us. She couldn't, in fact, come to back to school until May, and the substitute teacher was not in position to teach us algebra. She just taught the regular math class. So we ended up teaching ourselves. We took our other math class as well, but as far as the algebra was concerned, we ended up teaching ourselves. And 2 of us passed the citywide test at the end of the year to be placed out of algebra. But I guess that was the beginning when I thought I might want to become a mathematician. I know that after the graduation ceremony where we were recognized by the principal, the 2 of us who had passed the algebra test, we were recognized and asked to stand up. After that graduation ceremony, one of the parents, an African American man, approached me and said, "Congratulations, essentially, maybe you'll become a great mathematician." And so off to high school, but I did not go to the high school in my neighborhood. I did not go to the high school where my mother and father and their siblings had gone, my mother's siblings in particular. I went to the high school uh, across in that posher neighborhood where we could go swimming because that high school offered German, and I wanted to learn that language. My mother apparently wrote a letter to the Board of Education and gave a reason for why I wanted to attend the other school, and that was accepted. All the white kids used the same excuse, although they weren't interested in German. They were not interested in going to high school that essentially had become all black. So I ended up going to that high school. Now I should backtrack a little bit. That neighborhood where I grew up, that Little Italy, was interesting for a number of reasons, some of which I have uh, mentioned. But it was also interesting because it gave rise to some fantastic musicians: Billy Strayhorn, Earl Garner, Ahmet Jamal, Mary Lou Williams, and Billy Eckstine. They all came of age essentially between World War I and World War II. And they all came out of that neighborhood, all of them, which is just astounding given demographics of that neighborhood that would produce uh, that number of giants in music.
These were jazz musicians.
They were all pianists. I mean, Billy Strayhorn wrote, he was Duke Ellington's right-hand man. He
Okay.
ended up going to New York. He rode Take the A train. He rode Chelsea Bridge. He was uh, he was great. They were all pianists, composers. Billy Eckstine, of course, was a band leader as
Right.
well, singer. So that's a description of the neighborhood I grew up in. So off to Peabody High School, where I continued to have a reasonable amount of success in my coursework, in particular in mathematics and German. Uh, Many of the kids I attended school with, high school with, were of Jewish ancestry, and so a lot of the kids in my class either spoke German at home, some German at home, or Yiddish. But I became the star of German of the German language world at Peabody High School, and that that turned out to be, as I've said, an important aspect of my life. Uh, well, my life, period. The German connection. Yeah. So in 10th grade, let me stop. I thought maybe I could go to West Point because my family didn't have a whole lot of money, and if I went to West Point, I'd have a free education, and there was something called the West Point Story on television, and I thought, well, uh, I go to West Point, I can get a good education there. But when I was in 10th grade, the principal of my high school, who had been touring New England, he heard about a summer high school that was being offered by Yale uh, that coming summer. It was going to be the first year of the Yale Summer High School.
Mhm.
And they were looking for kids who were Yale material, but would probably never think to apply to Yale. They were looking for black kids. They were looking for white kids from Appalachia, kids of Italian ancestry in the urban areas. All these kids who would not ordinarily apply just because it was not on their radar. And so my principal pulled me out of chemistry class. He'd gone to the guidance counselor and asked one of the guidance counselors if there a kid who would fit well into this program, and the guidance counselors had nominated me. My principal's would not have been able to do that. My graduating class had 540 students, uh, so he he came up and pulled me out of chemistry class out in the hallway and said he wanted me to apply for uh, uh, this Yale Summer High School. And I went ahead and did that, despite the fact that I really wanted to take Algebra 2 that coming summer,
Mhm.
uh, so that I could get back on track to take calculus my senior year. Now, I had passed the Algebra 1 placement test. I decided to take it over again because I taught myself and I was not confident that I had learned everything I needed to do. So that had put me behind
Mhm.
as far as getting into calculus senior year. So my principal shook his head and said, "That's great that you want to take Algebra 2, but this is a wonderful opportunity that you can't pass up." And so I ended up applying, and I was accepted, one of the 100 boys accepted into that program, and
Mhm.
spent the summer in New Haven on the Yale campus. And great experience again. And surprise, surprise, when I mentioned to the math teacher in that program that I wanted to take Algebra 2, he said he'd teach me Algebra 2 on the side, in addition to all the other mathematics I was learning. And so I ended up taking Algebra 2 and a whole year of Algebra 2 in 6 weeks, and went back to the city of Pittsburgh and took a placement test, and I got an A in Algebra 2. So I got everything I wanted and more out of that
Okay.
summer. Yeah. So I ended up applying to Yale, and I was accepted. I was accepted. Senior year, I applied to Yale. That was 2 years, effectively 2 years after I had been in the Yale Summer High School, and I was one of the three kids that I know of from that inaugural year of Yale Summer High School accepted uh, at Yale. And
Mhm.
so there I was at Yale. And again, just an amazing experience. I think of my during class of roughly 1,100 boys, because at that time Yale only accepted males for Yale College. They accepted women into the graduate school, the medical school, the law school, but Yale College was an all-male preserve. So there were 1,100, and I think roughly 20 of us were African American. Of the 1,100, I think there were a few others who were from the uh, Caribbean and a few from West Africa, but so maybe black under that heading. Maybe there were 30, 25 to 30, but there were only maybe 20 of us African American. Well, again, just a fortunate placement for me. I continued to pursue German, studied mathematics among under some of the great mathematicians on the faculty there. And I went to Germany right after my sophomore year in college and ended up working in a bank in Germany. And that was basically the capstone experience for my German education, because that whole summer all I spoke was German while working in that bank in an office. Covered what are called letters of credit. So anyway, that ended up being a wonderful experience. Those summers, uh, when I needed to work, of course, to supplement my scholarships and financial aid, I uh, I had a job mopping floors. I had a job working in my mother's hospital as an orderly. I had a job, of course, in Germany. I had a job computer programming at Alcoa in Pittsburgh, and I graduated, and I ended up with a job at getting a job at Gulf Oil. I can show you a picture of my Gulf Oil
Okay.
uh, my Gulf Oil badge. Let me see if I can bring that up. There I am. Just turned 22 years old. This is a November 9th, right after my senior year in college. I've graduated. Spent a summer in Alaska cleaning salmon up at Anchorage. Drove from Tacoma with two classmates up to Fairbanks and then down to Anchorage, and spent the last 8 weeks living in an abandoned pickup truck. And then I came back to Pittsburgh and got this job at Gulf Oil. And I was at Gulf Oil for 3 years. I worked as an economic analyst, but Germany was calling me. Germany was calling me, and and I answered the call. I left Gulf Oil after 3 years. I paid off my mother's mortgage. I had a year's gross in the bank. I had paid off the small number of loans I had, education loans I had. And I wanted to go back to Germany. I wanted to go back to Germany and perhaps write a novel, but just live in Germany and speak the language. And so I went back. And after being there in Germany for about 4 or 5 months, I worked on the novel. I got it written, and I sent it off to a publishing house. I didn't know what I was doing, of course. I sent it off to one of the top publishing houses in New York, not knowing that that was a long shot at best, that they'd even look at it. And after 3 months, they wrote back and said, "We really enjoyed reading your novel, but it's not full length." Basically, if I'd been Hemingway or um, James Baldwin or someone like that, they probably would have published it. But really enjoyed it. If you're working on anything full length, please send it to us. Well, I wasn't working on anything full length, so I had nothing to send them. But I had, meantime, spied an advertisement in the Dusseldorf newspaper. I was in the Rhineland. That's where I was living. That's also where I had worked a few years earlier in the bank. I had spied this ad for part-time teachers, including a part-time teaching job, teaching mathematics. And I thought, well, you know what? I do that gratis, and they're going to pay me. I'll apply for the job, and I did, and I got the job. I got a job teaching mathematics, and so the last 2.5 years I was there, I uh, I taught mathematics at the high school level in Dusseldorf. And that rekindled my love of mathematics. I decided to return to the States and go to graduate school in mathematics. So my love of German language, I'd never taught anything in English before, and I spent 2.5 years teaching in German and following that and teaching mathematics, and that uh, that rekindled my love for mathematics, and I decided, yes, I do want to become a mathematician. So I went back, enrolled at the University of Pittsburgh, PhD program in mathematics, and I was on my way to becoming a mathematician. This is my dissertation, the first page, metric characterization of the irrationals via group operation. Okay, so what did I do then? Well, I had to get a job, right? I'd finished, and I gave a talk on my dissertation results at a conference in Houston, and the chair of the mathematics department at Auburn was in attendance, and he asked me to apply for an opening that they had. So I ended up going to Auburn for my first job. I was there for I was at Auburn for 4 years, and there was some turmoil in the department, and I decided that I really wanted to be closer to home anyway, and things had gotten ugly in the department. So I left Auburn. Uh, my arrival was a little noisier than my departure. I arrived, or even when I was recruited by Auburn, there was a major article in the Birmingham News, the fact that they'd hired this black guy, a black PhD from the University of Pittsburgh. At the time, they'd had a few black faculty members before, but in the College of Arts and Sciences, when I arrived, I was going to be the only black faculty member for a year or two before they hired a couple more. And so that was a major article in the spring when I was hired. When I arrived on campus, however, football season had started, and so I was able to come under cover of darkness, so to speak, because Auburn had a great football team at that time, a great basketball team. They had Bo Jackson was on the team. Charles Barkley was playing on the basketball team along with Chuck Person. So I was not the important black guy, or not certainly not the most interesting black guy on the campus at that point. So I stayed there for 4 years, and then I moved on. I took a position at the University of Richmond.
Mhm.
Let me see, where am I? University of Richmond. Now, I took that position, and that's what got me into was an important move. That's in Richmond. After being there for 3 years, I decided to ask my mother something about what she knew about her uh, genealogy. Well, she didn't know much. She knew the name of her grandfather, uh, Jones, and his name was James B. Jones. She didn't know it at first. She had to ask someone what her grandfather's name was. She knew it was Jones, of course, because her father was a Jones.
Mhm.
And that got me interested, and I ended up going, after I'd been there 3 years, I ended up deciding to go into the state archives because I was in the capital of the state and start looking for James B. Jones or anyone I could find who was related to me. And after I was there for 2.5 hours, I found my great grandfather, James B. Jones, in the birth records. That was the wrong place to look. I should not have been looking there. I should not have had any luck, but I didn't know anything about doing genealogical research at the time. I should have been looking at the census records. That's what I should have been doing. But I looked at the uh, register, and it turns out my great grandfather, James B. Jones, was born between 1852 or 53 and in 1861, the start of the Civil War. And so he was there and he was listed. James B., no last name. No, last name was there. The last name was there. And there's a column right next to the census record that says name of name of father if child be born free and in wedlock. Name of owner if child be born a slave. And uh, next to his name was William Thweet Blackwell. And I was off and running at that point because I knew my grandfather had a cousin who lived in that other block of Dean Street, the next block, whose last name was Blackwell. And I'd never made much of it. But now this whole gray fog of my ancestry started to lift. And
So that's when
and
you first got a taste of it.
oh yes, and and within months I had traced myself all the way with the help of, first of all, I found the owner's family and they helped me.
Oh.
I found the great granddaughter of the last owner, William Thweet Blackwell,
Mhm.
and
Is that
and
spelled
she
is that spelled Threat?
say that again.
How are you spelling the middle name?
Oh, it's TH, it's
Or
Thweet,
right, Thre.
Thweatt, I believe is the spelling. So there I was. I found a descendant of William Thweet Blackwell, and in the 1910 census record, and I got the Lunenburg County telephone directory and tried to call the number listed for him. Now it turns out he was dead, but his widow answered and said, "Well, he has a younger sister who was not in the 1910 census because she hadn't been born yet." Uh, and here's her number. I called her and talked with her for a while. She finally realized who I was. She knew my grandfather's cousin better than she knew my grandfather. But she gave me the telephone number of relatives of mine in Richmond, black relatives of mine in Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd lived in that city for over 3 years at that point and didn't know I was related to anyone in that town. And this great granddaughter of the last owner, had their telephone numbers, their names, right? And we're talking about how many years at this point after the Civil War had ended, and the families were still strongly connected. So I ended up finding those relatives and doing a lot of genealogy research, which I'm not going to try to go into in any detail. But I will say that let me show you some pictures of ancestors that I found, not just Blackwells, but bring this picture up. I think I can capture them all. The top line are my maternal ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this is my maternal, these two on the far right, the couple sitting together, are my maternal grandmother's uh, parents, Pittsylvania County. Their daughter married the the son of James Jones, who's the first person I found as a little boy, as a baby, born in 1856 in Lunenburg County in the birth register, who married Bill Balzer as his second wife. And I'm
What year?
descended of those two. They're both born in 1856. So on to his left is Lucy Brown. That's his mother. She was born circa 1823, and she had 8 children and lived with William Thweet Blackwell's family and was buried with them in their cemetery. So that is my mother's side, including uh, my one Blackwell descendant, that is Ama descendant, Ama and Tab descendant, James B. Jones. These letters that you see under the people's names, those are their haplogroups. For the women, it's the mitochondrial haplogroup, and for the men, it's their Y chromosome haplogroup. I was able to test enough family members because by the time I started doing DNA stuff, I'd done extensive genealogy and I could find the right descendant to get those haplogroups. The lower level, of course, are my Currie ancestors, my paternal side. This is uh, my great grandfather, Walter Currie. So everyone pictured here is a great grandparent, except for Lucy Brown, upper level on the left. My great great grandmother. She was, of course, born before photography was invented. So this is how I ended up meeting Thelma Doswell, because to try to find a picture of Thelma Doswell. There's Thelma Doswell with my daughter, Petra. This is at our house in the sunroom. Petra with Blackwell historian Thelma Doswell. She's reading to her.
Do you have an idea about what year that was?
Well, I would say Petra is about 3 years old, so I'd say this is about 1995. This is circa 1995. Yeah, I went down and picked her up, Thelma, and brought her up to our house. So here's a picture of this picture is of me and Thelma at her house. I was able to get back to my great 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 grandfather, and then the relatives that the descendant of the last owner pointed me to. They knew about Thelma Doswell, and that I contacted her, and we got to spend some time together over the years. And this picture was taken in 1990. These two pictures that you're seeing now were taken in 1991. That's my wife. This is before Petra was born. So anyway, Thelma Doswell allowed me to bridge the work that she'd done. I was able to tie my work in, going back to my third great grandfather, and get back to Amma. That's how that worked. So I got to know quite a bit about about the Blackwells, and of course, uh, some of the more illustrious descendants,
Mhm.
uh, such as Arthur Ashe, David Blackwell, the great mathematician. He and I met several couple of times. Here we are at a conference together.
Is
He
he's a relative?
That's what he believes. He finished a PhD in mathematics at age 21 or 22 at the University of Illinois in 1941,
Mhm.
and eventually became the chair of the statistics department at Berkeley. He's the first African American named to the National Academy of Sciences.
Is he alive today?
No, he's passed away. I mean, he was 22 in 1941, so he was born circa uh, uh, 19, let's say it's 1920. I'm not really sure. Let's say circa 1920. So he'd be 120,
Okay.
106 years old if he were living now. But anyway, he and I got to talk about genealogy a little bit. And here I am with my uncle, Ahmed Jamal. He was born in Jones. We're at the Kennedy Center. He's just been named a living jazz legend,
Mm.
and he has the medal around his neck. He eventually, of course, became a Lifetime Grammy Achievement Award recipient. This is my mother's brother. He's also obviously a Ahmad descendant. So those three, Arthur Ashe, David Blackwell, and my uncle Ahmad at the Kennedy Center. That was 2007, I believe. I gave a tribute to him at his at concert memorial at Jazz at Lincoln Center. I was the first speaker.
Mhm.
I can send that to you. I'm using it as a introduction to a memoir,
Okay.
my own memoir. But the tribute, of course, is to him was my relationship with him over the years.
Mhm.
He once said, "I would have become I might have become a mathematician if music hadn't found me first." He has no memory of not being able to play the piano. He started playing when he was 3 or a little bit younger. No one knows when he started, but an uncle went to the piano that my grandmother, Uncle Jamel's grandmother, had bought, and just played a little tune on it and teased the little kid, the little boy. And you play that? So joking with him, and he walked to the piano and played it. He was 3 years old, and that was a discovery. He must have been playing around with the piano on his own, and no one was paying any attention. That got people's attention immediately. So I left Richmond a year after I started doing the genealogy stuff and took a took a position at NSA, National Security Agency. I was 41 years old when I started at NSA, and I spent 25 years there. I went to NSA and I'd broken up with my girlfriend in Richmond, and so I was up there starting a new life. Within 9 months, I was married. Within 2 years, I was a father, and 2 years and 5 months, a little less than that, a little less than 2 years actually. Uh, I owned a house and had a mortgage. It was mowing lawns, so that was a big change for me. NSA was wonderful. It was a wonderful time. 25 years at that place. Um, here is a here is a photo of my wedding. It's my brother, me, of course, my stepfather, my mother's third husband turned out to be a great marriage. And in the front, my wife Shirley and my mother. I guess I got married in 91, a little bit shy of I was 42 years old. Shirley was 38. And then years later, we're proud parents of our daughter. This is in our backyard. This is my favorite picture of the two of them. This is on the Gwynns Falls, and of course, I live in Baltimore. So my life as a mathematician ran from uh, University of Pittsburgh, where I did my degree, to Auburn, to University of Richmond, to the National Security Agency. And that was National Security Agency. Going there was a wonderful, wonderful move. I was eventually elevated to the senior ranks. That's a picture of that's my elevation photo. Something called senior ranks, which you have government grade 1 through 15, and then you have the senior ranks. And eventually, I was fortunate enough to be elevated to the senior ranks. My favorite job there was being the chief of the cryptographic research and design division, the code makers. Yeah. So what happens? Let me just think about this for a second. Uh, so in retirement, what happens? Uh, well, I try to stay fit. You know, at Yale, I ran track. I was on the Yale track team. I had wonderful teammates. I had a teammate named Frank Shorter, who went on after he graduated to uh, to win the Olympic gold medal in the 1972 Olympics in the marathon. And I also had a teammate named Calvin Hill. Calvin Hill was a nationally ranked long jumper. He also was a pretty damn good football player. He ended up being Rookie of the Year in the National Football League and an All-Pro many years. His son, people might know his son a little bit better. People are a little bit younger. His son is Grant Hill, who became Rookie of the Year in the NBA. I don't think that's ever happened. One father-son combination, one Rookie of the Year in the NFL, the other Rookie of the Year in the NBA. Here's a picture of me running track. at Yale. This is the Ivy League championship. I'm over here. I'm going to get a bronze
Oh, I see.
medal. So I'm going to get a bronze medal. My teammate wins it. I'm 2/10 of a second behind him and a guy from the University of Pennsylvania between us for the silver.
I'll see. Okay.
This this is the day after I flunked my draft physical. I took the draft physical. I underwent the draft physical because my lottery number was low, so it was a foregone conclusion I would be called up. But I was thinking about running this race in the 200 meters the next day, and my blood pressure went through the roof while they were taking my blood pressure. So I failed the physical
I
and
see.
got bronze the next day. All I did was visualize making up the stagger on the guy outside me, and my blood pressure went through the roof. They tested me twice, and so I ended up uh, going out. The championship was the day after the physical, and I thought I'd be telling people I'm going to be going to Vietnam, and there I was, uh, not going to Vietnam and getting bronze, which was probably about right for me to get me an all Ivy selection. Well, I try to stay in shape, but I'm not running anymore. But I go out and walk. In retirement, I continue to do genealogy. I, for instance, knew that I had from 23andMe and several other companies that I had an infusion, a fairly substantial contribution from Native American ancestors, uh, uh, reasonable contribution to my genome from them. In particular, my X chromosome was essentially the whole central region. Half of that chromosome was from a Native American ancestor. Now, that's from my mother. Of course, she's a Blackwell. So I don't know what tribe contributed to my native ancestry, but I have native ancestry on both sides of the family. I can establish that using the DNA.
Right.
So I ended up deciding I want to do my X chromosome myself using my own methodology and see if I come up with the same thing the companies do.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote this paper and published it in the Journal of Humanistic Mathematics. This was a few years after I retired. It's a journal of human using hidden Markov modeling for biogeographical ancestry analysis. And anyone wants to read that, they're fine. That's fine. It's out there available. Uh, so I was able to, if I scroll through here, I was able to verify that I got the same result that 23andMe did as far as my X chromosome analysis was. The interesting thing is uh, you and your sibling only share 50% of your DNA because when the parents uh, contribute to your DNA, they mix it up. They have to take two strands
Mm-hmm.
and mesh and slap them together. And so, and they do it a different way. It happens a different way every time. And so you get you share about half of, uh, of your genome with your sibling. My brother did not inherit. My brother inherited more. Uh, Albert inherited more European ancestry than I did, and I inherited more Native ancestry than he did. That's my brother Albert.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, because for instance,
Yeah.
your Y, let's say chromosome one
Right.
consists of two strands, a strand from your mother and a
Right.
strand from your father.
Exactly. And
But your mother, in passing that strand, has to take both of her strands and mash them together. And every time an egg is formed, it's mashed together in a different way.
mm,
So you don't get all of what she had.
yeah.
Albert inherited a little more European ancestry, and I inherited a lot more native ancestry than he did. So anyway, I stayed in contact with my Yale classmates. I stayed in contact with my Yale classmates, and one day one of my Yale classmates was telling this story on Zoom. And it was a funny story, but I really thought that somehow in the 50 some years that had elapsed since we had graduated, that maybe it would have been embellished a little bit. And so I said, well, Jim, who told you this story? And he said, oh, my roommate, Bruce, told me the story. I said, well, let's get Bruce on a three-way email exchange and find out what's going on here, if this is what he told you, really. Well, Bruce got on the three-way exchange and said he'd never heard the story, right? And certainly doesn't remember ever telling it to anyone. So I was going to let it go, but his last name was Blackwell. And so I said, Bruce, where are your Blackwells from? And he said, and Jim interrupted. He said, Mel, I know your story. Your Blackwell line is in Virginia, and Bruce is from Georgia. And we were all classmates, but I didn't know Bruce at Yale. I didn't meet him there. Uh, so Bruce says, yeah, I'm from Georgia. That's where I was born. My father was born in Georgia. My grandfather was born in this little town in southern Virginia. I said, what's the name of the town? He said, Kinbury. And I said, within 30 minutes, I got offline. I got offline, and within a half an hour, I was able to get back to Bruce and said, you're Bruce Blackwell, your sixth great grandfather, fifth great grandfather, James Glenn Blackwell, bought my sixth great grandmother at Yorktown in 1735. And 231 years later, we both walked onto the Yale campus
My,
and did not meet
oh
for the
my,
4 years we were there together. We were in the same class at Yale. And then he became a physicist, I became a mathematician. He was in the intelligence community, so was I.
mhm.
At NSA, and we never met there. And because of a story he was supposed to have told, but had not, we finally met. And we've been in touch ever since. And so let me just bring up a picture of Bruce at Yale. That's Bruce. And that's me.
Okay.
So we're in the yearbook together. Well, there was another guy who was reading my novel, a guy named Phil Howard. And we were in the same secret society together. We were in Berzelius. There's a Book and Snake, there's Skull and Bones. These are senior year experience, and you're tapped into them your junior year. Someone approaches you one day and taps you on your shoulder and says, I'm tapping you for Berzelius. And each one of these six or seven uh, landed societies taps in 15 people. And so Phil Howard, who he wrote a best-selling book called The Rule of Nobody in the 90s. He's a lawyer. He was in Berzelius with me, and we'd stayed in touch, and he was reading my novel. And he said, he mentioned Caswell County, which is in North Carolina, which is where my Currie roots are. Just a county just south of the Virginia border. Its northern boundary is with Virginia. And he said, was that just fiction, or do you have an actual connection? I said, well, my grandfather, Currie, has his line goes back to Caswell County. He says, my grandfather's line goes back to Caswell County, too. So here we are standing, Phil Howard and I standing in front of Berzelius. He's over here on the far right in the back row, and I'm right next to him. And we did not know that we both had roots in Caswell County. This picture was taken in 1970. And we stayed in touch all these years, and we did not know that. So with Bruce Blackwell, his grandfather and my maternal grandfather were from the same county and had with a strong Blackwell connection. With Phil, our my paternal grandfather and his grandfather are from the same county. It turns out that Phil is also a Blackwell, and he never met Bruce Blackwell. Bruce Blackwell, they were all in the same class. Bruce Blackwell never met Phil Howard. I'd met Phil Howard, but did not know about the connection to him. I'd not met Bruce Blackwell, but had a connection to him. The three of us are all connected with this Blackwell thing, and I'm connected with one on my father's side, another on my mother's side. And now we have regular conversations back and forth. So, what else have I done? Uh, I have I worked in the I took a job in retirement for a semester teaching in Jessup. If you watched the TV series The Wire, you would heard the men's prison at Jessup mentioned frequently. So I taught college algebra there. I also I've written a couple books. I wrote the novel. The novel came out in 2019, and the American Mathematical Society brought out my math book in 2018, Mathematics, Rhyme, and Reason. I've also spent some time on reservations, either near the end of my tenure at NSA uh, or right afterwards. I was on the Salish Kootenai Reservation twice. Here's a picture of me on that reservation uh, with a bunch of the Falcon teachers and some of the tribal members.
When was that, Mel?
This was this was taken, I think, in 2010, I
Okay.
believe. And I was on that and I was back again a couple years later on the Salish Kootenai Reservation. This was in connection with my affiliation at NSA doing outreach, various groups. And I was also on the Navajo Reservation. Oh, I'm not sure what year that was. I think it was 2016. On the Navajo Reservation, I went out there for a few days at the invitation of Tatiana Shubin, who's down in the first row on the extreme right. And I gave a talk to the young kids in the mass circles uh, program that summer. And I don't know if I mentioned this. I was on Baltimore City Civilian Review Board for 6 years, doing police oversight, trying to uh, hold police accountable for misdeeds. These misdeeds were complaints, were follow up on complaints filed by citizens who had an encounter that they did not enjoy with the Baltimore Police Department. So I did that for 6 years. So those are some of the things I've done in retirement. I wrote a DNA paper and wrote a couple books and civilian review board, some outreach on the reservations uh, in our country. So, is there anything else you'd like me to talk about?
No, Mel, it's all been very interesting. Thank you,
Pretty
Mel, for sharing your life experiences, your story with me and with others. I really appreciate it, and this helps preserve the history of our family for generations to come.